Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into some, really thought-provoking reflections on those classic instructions in Ephesians. We're looking at how Paul, yes, the very same figure whose authorship is hotly debated, is navigating family roles, social dynamics, and, well, humility.
I'm excited to talk about this. So, we're starting with the fact that tradition holds for nearly 2,000 years that Paul was the author, right?
Exactly. But modern scholars, like Raymond E. Brown, suggest that around 70 to 80% of critical scholarship rejects Paul as the writer. Still, the tradition and church belief for millennia affirm his authorship, and that's the stance we're exploring.
That's fascinating, because it really sets the stage for how we view his radical instructions. I mean, even if modern scholars question his identity, the message itself still resonates historically.
Right. The context really is everything. Paul's message is counterintuitive to our modern ideals. He's asking, for example, wives to treat their husbands as though they were, as they would treat Jesus
Yep.
Christ in the flesh.
And that in itself raises an eyebrow for many today, doesn't it? How can a directive like that be seen as anything but, well, extreme?
Absolutely, but here's the twist. Paul isn't picking on women or elevating men per se. Instead, he's setting up this revolutionary concept, one where each human relationship is seen through the lens of
Right.
Christ-like humility.
So it's not simply a hierarchical command, but more like an invitation to serve each other, even if that means putting aside what we usually fight for, like personal rights or ego.
Exactly. He outlines it pretty clearly across various groups. For wives, he says, honor your husband, seek his good, treat him with the reverence you'd give to Jesus. Then he switches it up for husbands, demanding they lead by, serving their wives as Jesus served his church, giving up power even to the point of sacrificing one's very life.
That's pretty radical. Almost like he's saying, forget about your rights, turn yourself into a servant for the sake of love.
Exactly so. And it doesn't stop there. He touches on family roles broadly. He tells parents, especially fathers, to raise their children in nurturing, wise ways, and children are called to respect and obey them. It's an all-encompassing call to humility in every relationship.
Right. And what about those passages on slavery? That always gets the conversation heated.
Ah, yes. The slavery section is tricky. Paul's addressing real societal norms of his time. He tells slaves that even in servitude, they should work sincerely as if serving the Lord, and, interestingly, he advises slave owners to remember they're no more important to God than the people they enslave, urging them to quit any form of threat or abuse.
It's like he's saying, everyone, regardless of your status, must humble yourself. But, isn't that approach rather at odds with modern ideas of autonomy and rights?
That's a good point. And where some might challenge the text. I mean, on the surface, it sounds like abdication of rights. But Paul's message is fundamentally about voluntarily choosing to lower one's status to serve others, a sort of counterintuitive
Yep.
empowerment.
So in a way, it's not about enforced inferiority, but about a willing, almost revolutionary self-sacrifice for the sake of community and, spiritual progress.
Exactly. It's like, he's turning the idea of power on its head. In his view, introducing God's kingdom into our flawed world requires that we, each of us, stop focusing solely on personal gain or guarding our rights so fiercely.
And yet, isn't that a stance that, frankly, clashes with the spirit of modern individualism? I mean, come on. Who really wants to give up their rights today?
I totally get that. But Paul's emphasis on service and humility is almost like a radical proposal. True glorification of God, he argues, comes not from dominance and ego, but from embracing a role of servant leadership.
Right. It's almost countercultural when you think about it. Even now, many of us struggle to live that out. We often end up driven by ego anyway.
Yes, and he admits that too. Paul himself confesses that in practice, embodying this ideal is incredibly challenging. He's not suggesting it's easy. Rather, it's a constant, humbling path.
So, if I understand correctly, the underlying thrust is that every relationship, be it between spouses, between parents and children, or even between slaves and masters, should mirror the selflessness seen in Jesus' own example.
That's right. The essential call is, be subject to one another in the reverence of Christ. Essentially, drop the ego and let humility lead.
Yeah. And do you think that's been properly understood over these 2,000 years? It seems like even now, there's a lot of spiritual stagnation in that regard.
Exactly. It's as if, despite all the centuries of theological debate, we haven't really progressed spiritually in living out this radical humility. Our 21st century sensibilities, especially in places like America, might even find the idea repulsive.
I can see that. It's like we're so caught up in celebrating our rights and individualism that the very idea of serving others seems, well, counterproductive.
Right? It's almost ironic. Paul's instructions invite us to essentially set aside our rights and even our status in order to serve a higher purpose, which he identifies with Christ's example of sacrificial love.
Yep. There's a paradox here, that in order to truly honor God, you need to willingly embrace inferiority. Isn't that just, wild?
It's wild indeed. And while many may critique that as being an outdated or even oppressive notion, if we dive into the context, Paul is not advocating for submission for its own sake. Rather, he's inviting a transformation, a letting go of the ego to create a community where even the most marginalized have inherent dignity.
Right. But then some might say, does that mean we're supposed to ignore our personal ambitions and rights? How do we reconcile that, especially in a modern, competitive society?
That's a good critique. It's not about erasing ambition altogether, but about reframing it. Instead of seeking personal glory, the focus shifts to uplifting others. Think of it like, a relay race where every runner's success depends on passing the baton selflessly.
I love that analogy. It's like our achievements are only as good as how we enable others to succeed too, huh?
Exactly. And Paul's admonition calls each person, wife, husband, parent, slave, or even slave owner, to embrace that communal spirit. It's a counterbalance to the relentless pursuit of self-interest that's so embedded in modern culture.
Right. Yet, isn't it a bit, idealistic? I mean, even as you said earlier, many of us, including yourself, struggle to put this into practice.
True. And I'd say that's the beauty and the challenge of it. It's not about achieving perfection, but continually striving to live in a way that reflects that, self-sacrificial love. I often find myself, failing miserably at times, which just shows how hard this ideal is to actually embody in everyday life.
So in a sense, Paul's message is both timeless and, incredibly demanding. His call to humbly serve seems to ask us to turn the conventions of power and rights completely upside down.
Right on. It's like he's saying that true service to God, and by extension to each other, requires us to be willing to place ourselves in a seemingly inferior position. It's not about weakness, but about, strength in vulnerability and selflessness.
Yeah, even if that means, as counterintuitive as it is, giving up something we deeply cling to, our right to assert our own importance.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this text so persistently challenging. It calls for a complete reordering of our values, a radical embrace of humility, one that, frankly, many of us have yet to master.
It really is a call to rethink everything about our daily interactions, isn't it? From family dynamics to workplace relationships.
Yes, and that's the brilliance of it. Paul's core message, regardless of whether you see him as the actual author or not, is inviting us to, let go of self-interest in favor of a greater calling where serving others is the ultimate form of reverence.
Right. And perhaps that's the lesson we need to relearn, even today. A reminder that in truly honoring one another, we're actually, well, making the world a bit more reflective of that eternal, otherworldly kingdom Paul talks about.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between tradition and a modern context, acknowledging the difficulties, yet striving for a deep, countercultural humility.
This conversation really leaves one with a lot to chew on. It challenges us to re-examine not just historical texts, but our own everyday values.
Absolutely. While it might sound, extravagant or even impractical in our competitive world, Paul's message remains a bold invitation to transform not only our relationships but also our inner lives. Thanks for joining in on this deep dive.
And thanks for such an enlightening discussion. It's given me a lot to think about.